to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He is a writing coach and award winning author, a former CNN senior copy editor for the Emmy and Peabody Award winning news program, The Situation Room with Wolf Blitzer, no other than Mr. John Dedakis. Welcome to Book 101, Mr. John, and can you please introduce more about yourself?
Hi, Daniel. Thanks very much for this opportunity to be here. I'm John Dedakis. I'm a novelist, a manuscript editor, a writing coach, and and former editor on CNN's The Situation Room with Wolf Blitzer. And I'm here to talk primarily, I guess, about my most recent novel, Enemies Domestic, which is a political thriller. And I'll follow your
Yes.
curiosity, Daniel.
Indeed. And thank you so much for sharing your legacy to the world. For sure. Your knowledge and wisdom. What inspired you to write Enemies Domestic and tackle such intense themes like abortion and political polarization?
Came up with the idea when the Supreme Court ruled that they overturned Roe v. Wade, which was the 1973 Supreme Court decision that legalized a woman's right to choose to have an abortion. And my wife and I were sitting together having coffee when the abortion decision came down. And I'd already written 5 novels, and it's a series. And my protagonist is a 20 something young woman. She had been a White House correspondent, which is what I did when Reagan was president. And at the end of Fake, which was the fifth novel, Lark Chadwick, my protagonist, was pregnant and ambivalent about becoming a single mom. So Cindy, my wife, and I thought that it was a good idea to try to put Lark in a post Roe era, facing the decision of whether or not to have an abortion. And as it turns out, the book was published July 4th, 2024, the same week that the Supreme Court of the United States ruled that presidents have absolute immunity from prosecution for crimes they commit as part of their public duties. And as it turns out, Lark, in the first scene of Enemies Domestic, is White House press secretary. And the first question that she's asked comes from a reporter with an agenda who wants to know, are you or are you not planning to abort your unborn child? And so that question puts Lark in the crosshairs of this toxic political maelstrom that we're living in right now, where everybody has very strong opinions diametrically opposed to each other, and Lark is caught in the crossfire of that, and a dictator becomes president.
Interesting indeed, Mr. John. And how does Laura Chadwick's journey in this book differ from her previous adventures in the series?
In many ways, they're similar in the sense that her life is at stake and she's dealing with various forms of grief. The series started 20 years ago when I wrote Fast Track, and in that book, Lark is dealing with the suicide of the aunt who raised her from infancy. And in subsequent books, Lark is dealing with other losses. By the time we get to Enemies Domestic, Lark's boyfriend died in a previous book of a heroin overdose, which is something that also claimed the life of my youngest son in 2011. So, in a sense, Lark is dealing with a lot of the same kinds of losses that I've dealt with. So, writing has become quite a catharsis and therapeutic, I guess you could say.
Definitely. The book is described as your most controversial, yet how did you approach writing about sensitive topics like white Christian nationalism?
Well, abortion is especially the front and center issue, and I've been on all sides of the issue, and so I didn't want it to be, preachy. I wanted people to understand that there are powerful arguments on all sides of the issue, and that I wanted people, no matter where they came down on the abortion issue, to feel that their position was fairly represented through the characters that are presented. And so, abortion is an issue. White Christian nationalism is an issue, because that also is something that is fueling our politics right now. Mental illness is very much something under discussion and dramatically dealt with in Enemies Domestic, because I think that a lot of our political discourse right now is fueled by mental illness, quite frankly.
Definitely. And how did your background as a CNN journalist influence the authenticity of the White House press secretary role in the story?
Well, I covered the White House when Reagan was president, the last 3 years of Reagan's presidency. Of course, that was in the 80s before, there were cell phones and the internet and things like that. But basic journalism is still, trying to find out what's really going on behind the scenes. And so the the thing that all of my novels have a journalism backdrop. And so what I'm hoping to do is to help people understand how journalism really operates. And it's not pretty all the time, and it's certainly not perfect, but I think people have a kind of a skewed point of view about it. In fact, Fake, my fifth novel, I started writing that when Trump was elected president the first time. And I started writing it because I was troubled by his statement that journalists are enemies of the American people. It's just not true. But yet, I think that a lot of people are really under the impression that when we were at CNN and when Obama was running for president, that we would sit around going, "How are we going to get this guy elected?" And that's just not true. It's a firing offense to make things up.
Yes, it's a miracle. So, how does enemies domestic reflect the current tensions between democracy and authoritarianism in America?
Well, I mean, as I say, I wrote it when the presidential election was still going on, and I intended it to be sort of a cautionary tale. And as it turns out, in the first, few months of the Trump administration, Trump 2.0, we are steadily moving toward an authoritarian government. Um, all of the institutions of government have been under attack, and even the courts don't seem to be an effective check and balance on the executive branch. Congress is worthless. I mean, the Republicans, as far as I'm concerned, it's a cult. The Republican Party is a Trump cult, and so I think that we are in really bad shape right now. And as it turns out, I think Enemies Domestic has been fairly prescient about anticipating where we might be going.
Were there any personal experiences that shape the way you wrote about mental illness in the book?
Ooh, that's I appreciate that question, because I think mental illness is very important in our society, and we throw the word crazy around a lot, almost flippantly, and yet mental illness is very serious. And my sister was manic depressive. She killed herself in 1980, carbon monoxide poisoning, and that fueled the very first novel that I wrote. And so mental illness is a theme, I think, that runs through my novels as well, because I think at essence, and I'm certainly not a psychologist, so this is, I'm just going from the personal experience of being around it. I think that mental illness is, in a sense, being out of touch with reality, and it's a sort of it's letting your emotions rule. And so that's one of the things that we address, or I address directly head on, in Enemies Domestic, in a way that I think is, I hope, in in a redemptive way, and in a serious way, and in a constructive way, because I think mental illness is very much at play in our relationships and certainly in our governance right now.
Very well said, Mr. John. Very well said. Beautifully, beautifully articulated. How did you balance the thriller elements with the deeper emotional and ethical elements Lark faces?
Well, I think that, I mean, at its root, the definition of a thriller is sort of the ticking clock. And so, as a journalist, we dealt with the ticking clock all the time, deadline pressure. And that usually evokes a lot of fear. Fear of not making the deadline, or in the case of, any kind of fiction, fear of losing your life or having the world blow up, or, all kinds of dire things. So I think fear is quite the motivator in Lark's case, and in the case of writing a thriller. It's that, building that inner tension, that conflict between seeking peace and tranquility, but it's a struggle to find it when there are forces beyond your control that are pressuring you and pressuring your very existence.
Mr. John, can you describe a favorite scene from Enemy's Domestic that captures the heart of the story?
Oh my. Okay. There's a scene between Lark and her mentor and friend Lionel Stone. Lionel has been a character in all six novels, and Lark met Lionel when Lark was researching the deaths of her parents. She was orphaned as an infant, and so she goes to the small town in southern Wisconsin where the accident happened that orphaned her. She gets a newspaper clipping and discovers she's the miracle baby who survived a car train collision. And Lionel is her mentor and boss. And so he's got a Pulitzer Prize from his time as a reporter with the New York Times. So he's got journalism chops, and he takes Lark under his wing and teaches her about journalism. So when we get to Enemies Domestic, both Lark and Lionel have experienced separate but tragic losses that have become national news. And so the scene that I've created is a scene between the two of them as they're crafting an op-ed piece for the New York Times that address the issue of mental illness. And so it's actually a scene that I use in the writing classes that I teach, because I had no idea how that scene was going to turn out. I just knew that Lionel and Lark had to write this article. And so what I did, and what I do when I get stuck in my writing, is I just get the characters talking to each other. And so as they are talking, they are brainstorming mental illness and how to write about it.
Mr. John, how do you hope readers take away from Lark's struggle to maintain her sanity in a polarized environment?
One of the things that I really hope is that once they finish the book, they'll keep wondering about Lark, wondering what she's up to now, wondering what's going to happen next, because I like to end my books with not necessarily a cliffhanger, but something that's unresolved in her life. And so I want the reader to continue to be thinking about Lark. In fact, I've actually had people text me at 2 in the morning saying, I need another Lark book. What's going on with Lark?
Definitely. So, Mr. John, as a writing coach, award winning author, what are your short term and long term goals?
Ooh, short-term goal would be I've written a memoir. It's gone through 7 drafts, and it's now sitting with an acquisitions editor at Kensington Publishing. Um, don't know how that's going to turn out. Certainly, if that falls through, I've got other options. So that would be sort of a short term thing, along with writing book 7. My wife and I are sort of working together on that. We've thought of some ideas. I do the writing. She does the criticizing, and then and
Teamwork.
I think another exactly. She's very smart and has gotten me through a lot of difficult times as a writer. And I think another thing that I'm working on as well is I'm expanding my business so that I'm not just working with wannabe writers, but I'm also inspiring people who are struggling with grief to use writing as a way to heal. So I'm interested to talking with, corporations and their wellness programs, associations that are trying to help people cope, veterans organizations. I mean, grief and loss, it doesn't just mean the loss of a loved one. It can be the loss of a job, a pet, your health, your innocence. Anything can produce a grief experience. And no matter whether your background is finance or writing, writing can certainly be a catharsis and a way of getting to know yourself better.
Definitely. And Mr. Jan, good luck to your goals and looking forward for more success. And
Thank you.
what will be your piece of advice for those people out there who want to be a writer and award-winning author?
Well, I think that probably the most important thing is to write. I mean, that seems sort of self evident, but you'd be surprised at how many people really have a strong desire to write, have some good ideas, but they're very self critical and they talk themselves out of it before they even give it a try. And so, my suggestion is if you've got an idea and you have a strong urge, do it right, but then get better. You're never going to be, you're not, there's always going to be somebody better than you, but you'll be better than other people as well. And the goal is to bring your writing to a professional level. And the way you do that is to go to writing conferences, get books on writing, go to writing classes, and write and just improve. Get people to, give you critical feedback on your writing. There are a lot of things that a person who's got the desire can do to be successful as a writer.
Thank you for your advice, Mr. John. And can you recommend a book that influenced your journey or books that influenced your journey?
I can recommend two. One is The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. I read that when I was in college in an American history class when we were studying the Dust Bowl of the 1930s, and historical fiction really made history come alive when Steinbeck gets into the characters of the family that goes from Oklahoma to California on Route 66 in search of a better life. And then the other book I would recommend is something called The Weekend Novelist, written by Robert Ray, Ray. It was a template that I used for the first two novels that I wrote because it's a very practical guide for how to write a novel, even if you only have a weekend or a limited amount of time. So those two books were very helpful to me along the way.
Thank you for that recommendation, Mr. John. And how does enemies domestic build on themes of fake news explored in your previous book, Fake?
Well, I mean, we are now living in an era of fake news. Journalism has changed dramatically since I first started as a reporter 50 years ago, more about 50 years ago. And we are now in a position where there is just so much information out there, and people with cell phones have hundreds of thousands of followers, and there's no editor on their shoulder going, where'd you get that? How do you know that's true? And so I
Right.
think that the danger right now is that we are flooded with falsehoods, and it's very important for us to be discerning consumers of information. But there are still reliable news sources out there. Two of them are the Associated Press and Reuters, wire services that deal in just the facts. And we spend a lot of time on social media. We spend a lot of time in front of the cable news outlets, CNN included, and we're just listening to analysis and spin. And, I think it's really important to take the time. You don't have to take as much time as you do sitting in front of the TV. Take the time to read, to get the facts from reputable news organizations. Have your opinions informed rather than reinforced.
Mr. John, how does the setting of the White House amplify the stakes for Lark in enemies domestic?
The White House is the center of power in this country and to a certain extent the world. Although right now we are sort of in an America first mode, more isolationist. We're not taking the lead in the world like we have in the past. But and this is an evolution of the US system of governance because we started out with three co equal branches of government. There was the executive, the judicial, and the legislative, and they were all supposed to be a check and balance on each other. But over the years, presidential authority has exploded, it's ballooned, so that the president has a tremendous amount of power that he didn't have at the very beginning of the Union. And so, all the more so now that the White House is an important focal point for my novels. Lark is in a friendship with the president in my novel. And to be honest, there's a certain degree of attraction there. I mean, they've known each other for two books now, three books. And, you know, in one book, the president's wife, the first lady, dies. That's one of the focal points of Fake, the fifth novel, and at the same time, Lark is going through a grieving process for her boyfriend. So there's an attraction between her and the president, but they're not acting on it because they're both their grief is still fresh after the losses of their loved one. But there's a certain sexual tension between the president and Lark as well. So, to a certain extent, we're seeing the human side of the president as well, because the presidency, is cloaked in mystery and mystique and stuff like that. The president is just a guy, a person. And that's one of the things that I think we're seeing it play out in all of the books since Troubled Water. Troubled Water, the president was the governor of Georgia running for president. In Fake, he becomes president, and in Enemies Domestic, well, things happen.
Things happen for
Things
sure.
happen.
Mr. John, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people, my other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and my book 101 review in fifth season too, comedy 101 in second season, and my food 101 in fifth season as well, geography 101 in fourth season, and my baby podcast, law 101 and Mental Health 101 and Movie 101 Review and Music 101 in fourth season and My Love Letters in third season too and Science 101 and Sex 101 in its first season. Please listen to them
Wow.
wherever you listen your podcast.
Wow,
Mr.
you're
John,
a busy guy.
yes, indeed. Mr. Jan, I'm inviting you to be my guest on Mental Health 101 and let's talk about mental health awareness if you interested to it.
I'd love to. That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Awesome. So what next for Lark Chadwick? And can we expect more mysteries that tackle big societal issues?
Yes, we're going to. I really don't want to get into any of the details about book seven yet, but there is something that the way enemies domestic, the way fake ends leads to enemies domestic. So, and the way enemies domestic ends leads to book seven, which I think. Well, I'm not even going to give away the title yet because it's too early. It's a ways yet before it's going to happen.
Interesting, Mr. Jan. I'm looking forward for that book seven, and you are most welcome to come back and let's talk about it.
Thank you. Thank you.
And and Mr. John, again, thank you so much for sharing your legacy to the
Okay.
world. And for you. your knowledge and wisdom. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your advocacy, your books, or whatever projects that you are doing right now?
Sure. I mean, probably the best support would be going to my website, which is my name, johndedakis.com, JOHN, D as in dog E, D as in dog A, KIS as in Sam.com.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. John Dedakis because if you support him, more and more and more empowering books to come, more and more and more award-winning piece to come for sure, and empowering advocacy to come. So, Mr. John, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Daniel.
More to come, people. See you soon.